Hare Krishna. So we welcome all the devotees who have joined for this devotee care weekly conversations, Vaishnav Seva. We are very honored to have with us after His Holiness Jayapatak Swami Maharaj, His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj, His Holiness Devamrit Swami Maharaj. We have this week His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj. Welcome His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj, who is one of the senior most Prabhupada's disciples, was very active in the GBC, was one of the founders of ISKCON in India, and especially the ISKCON Juhu temple. And he has spent many years serving Srila Prabhupada very closely and has like hundreds of remembrances of Srila Prabhupada. And he's just about to publish his book about the Juhu ISKCON temple. And so today, our topic is Srila Prabhupada as an embodiment of devotee care. So thank you, Maharaj, for joining us this evening, your morning. I would like to begin by asking a question to you on, in your experiences with Srila Prabhupada over the years in that period, could you share any anecdote of with Srila Prabhupada or exchanges where Srila Prabhupada demonstrated care for the body or physical care, concern for the devotee's health or something like that?
Yeah. There are a number of instances, some involving me and some involving others. One notable one involved Yamuna Devi, and I thought that it would be nice to read her description because it was like very striking. This was after the first Delhi Pandal, and she writes that she was exhausted and she felt sick, and so she was staying at Dalmia Bhavan, and it was a very crowded situation, perhaps 10 to 15 of us in one room. And the only place free was the bottom shelf in one of the walk-in closets. We had all of our paraphernalia piled up, and I was in a sleeping bag down on the bottom shelf. Srila Prabhupada noticed I was missing, and I was later told that he had inquired many times where I was. One day I became aware of the door being opened, and I turned to see Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet walking into that closet room. He placed his hand on my head and inquired, "Yamuna, how are you doing?" I said, "I'm always thinking of you, Srila Prabhupada." Then I explained my symptoms, and he said, "I think this is jaundice. Now I will take charge of your recovery. You will never get well in these conditions on the floor." Srila Prabhupada had a hospital bed brought for me and moved me into a room right next to his, with floor-to-ceiling windows, neem trees outside, and a fan. And he came in every day to check on my progress. He also called in an Ayurvedic doctor and gave me a diet for jaundice. And then she describes the diet that he put her on. And it involved something called petta, which was wax gourd or a white kind of pumpkin taken raw, covered in a thick layer of caramelized sugar, which was ghastly for me. Srila Prabhupada said, "This is your medicine. You have to eat it every day." and you also have to drink sugarcane juice. The first time I took a bite of peta, it tasted like the most bitter, horrible thing because of my jaundice. Srila Prabhupada would personally stand and watch me eat the peta. And he would smile. So that was an example from hers. I have a small example of mine. We were in Juhu, and I used to go to the city all day long and come back at night and report to Srila Prabhupada. So one evening I came to Prabhupada's room after a long day. And as usual, I had not taken any prasad from the morning until the evening. Srila Prabhupada looked at me and asked, "How are you feeling?" I then noticed how weak and sick I actually was. So I replied, "Well, frankly speaking, Srila Prabhupada, I feel a little tired." Srila Prabhupada immediately ordered grapes for me from his own kitchen. He said grapes were very good for strength and energy. And then he insisted I eat the grapes in his presence. Soon he asked if I was feeling stronger. And yes, I was. Finally, he concluded, to work very hard for Krishna for 2 days and then to recuperate for 3 days, that is not a very good proposal.
Thank you. Thank you, Maharaj, for sharing these beautiful stories about Srila Prabhupada's, care and concern, and is demonstrating so much of his personal interest in helping devotees remain physically fit. Of course, as we know that, the temples have been created specifically for giving spiritual nourishment. But many times it may also happen that one does not understand the importance of what we are receiving, and one may become complacent about it. So, specifically with respect to spiritual care, like for example, the chanting, the studying of books, attending the programs, could you share any of your memories of Srila Prabhupada emphasizing on spiritual care? Physician, heal thyself first. That means as devotees, we should be spiritually nourished first, and then we can help others.
Yeah, he was constantly instructing us about the importance of sadhana. And of course, he set the example under ordinary circumstances, but he also set the example under extraordinary circumstances. And one example was at the Kumbh Mela in 1971. We were living in tents, and Srila Prabhupada was also living in a tent, maybe a little bigger and a little furnished, probably with a heater. But it was so cold that we preferred to stay in our sleeping bags than to come out and face that biting cold air. And consequently, we were missing Mangal Arti. And Srila Prabhupada, to encourage us to attend Mangal Arti, he came out of his tent and bathed in, there were pumps, sort of like hand pumps. that came out with cold water. That's what we had to bathe in. So Srila Prabhupada came out into that sort of common outdoor area, and he was taking a cold bath, in that freezing water, despite his age and frail health. And when we heard that Srila Prabhupada was doing that, we had to get out of our sleeping bags and come out and do what he was showing by his example. We had to do so that we could be there for Mangalarti and the morning program in the Pandal. So he really went out of his way, to encourage us to attend the morning program. And just a small aside. So in the Pandal, as I said, it was very cold, and it could be windy too. And Nanda Kumar Prabhu was the pujari, and he kept, but the wind kept blowing out the ghee lamp, and he was really struggling with it. And finally, Srila Prabhupada came up to help him, but even then the ghee lamp kept getting blown out, and then Srila Prabhupada, through the microphone, he said, Harinama, Harinama, Harinami Vikevalam, Kalo Nasteva, 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 Gatiranyata. Reminding us that although all the elements of the morning program were important, but ultimately Harinam is everything. And, even if we have to struggle with the other elements and they don't work out, but we always have the holy name. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj. Just related to this topic, since you were witness to the kind of care which Srila Prabhupada demonstrated towards protecting Sri Radharas Bihariji. So, typically we find that as the number of devotees in ISKCON is growing across the world, then people may start thinking that having a temple and deities is like normal, and it's just one more temple opening and one more set of deities, we just get them ordered and install them and things like that. But in your interactions with Srila Prabhupada during those days in Juhu, and especially with Sri Radharas Bihari, of course it's a very detailed subject, but maybe many of our listeners today are not aware of the kind of care which Srila Prabhupada showed to welcome and request Sri Radharas Bihari to stay there. So, could you throw some light on what kind of care Srila Prabhupada demonstrated with respect to his relationship with those deities and some of the challenges you faced in that period?
Yeah, so before Juhu, we were living in an apartment called Akash Ganga on Bulabai Desai Road, which was known as Warden Road. And then when we got the Juhu land, Srila Prabhupada wanted us to bring the deities, naturally. And the land, although we entered into an agreement to purchase it, but the land was owned by one Mr. A.B. Nair, who was a demon. Once I gave a class about what happened in Juhu in New Dwarka, Los Angeles. And His Grace Virabahu Prabhu afterwards told me, I usually don't like it when devotees use the word demon to describe people. But after hearing your description, I agree, actually, Nair was a demon. So he was basically trying to cheat Srila Prabhupada and, take money from him and eventually, on some pretext, cancel the agreement and keep the money and send us away. But Srila Prabhupada, understood, as I say, not possession is 9/10 of the law, like how important it would be for us to maintain possession by having the deities. And he made a promise to them, my dear sir, you just come and sit here and I will build you a temple. And I took that statement for the title of my forthcoming book, I'll Build You a Temple. And he did. But all along, he took great care to see that the deities were worshipped properly. And there was one incident, because before we had our semi-permanent temple, we had a pandal, and then that's how we began at Hare Krishna land in Juhu. And then after the pandal program, we had like something like a shamayana, a little platform for the deities, and a brahmachari would sleep there at the night. And one night someone came in and stole the deity's jewelry in spite of the brahmachari being there. And Malati Dasi informed Srila Prabhupada what was happening. And Srila Prabhupada wrote me such a heavy letter, I've come to understand that the deities are being neglected. This is a most abominable affair. And I was like really stunned by that letter. And it took me a while to recover from Srila Prabhupada's heavy statements. But he was so protective of the deities. And not just protective of the deities, he was protective of our spiritual lives, because he knew that if we were neglectful of the deities, we would be committing offenses, and thus we would be suffering spiritually. But he was always concerned about the deity's service, and he was always checking with us, and I had to report what I was doing, to protect the deities. He said I should buy a safe and, keep the deity's jewelry. It wasn't real jewelry, but people might have thought it was. Keep the deity's jewelry in a safe. And he gave many detailed instructions about how to protect the deities and their paraphernalia.
Maharaj, many times devotees feel that the main aspect of Krishna consciousness is taking care of one's spiritual sadhana, and even to some extent taking care of the body. And many times one feels that the mental or the emotional aspects of one's life may not be so directly important in the progress of your life, because after all, so many of our great acharyas and different mahajans in our sampradaya, we just saw them performing such tremendous austerities and showing the way by their spiritual tapas or spiritual prowess. So maybe, at this point, I would request you to share some of Srila Prabhupada's, pastimes, or Prabhupada's emphasis on mental and emotional care for the devotees and how important it is with respect to our progress in spiritual life? And if yes, then how is this emotional care connected to our spiritual life and spiritual progress? Because it looks like spiritual life is a standalone element where the holy name is there, the holy name enters your heart, and then your progress is very much dependent on that. So, where do you factor in this emotional care element, and what has been your experience with Srila Prabhupada with respect to that?
Well, I would say that as far as emotional care, I would translate that into feeling discouraged. How Srila Prabhupada, because they protected us or cared for us, protected us from becoming discouraged. I'll give a little example. Anyway, there were a lot of complications regarding establishing the Juhu temple because of Nair and his accomplices. So at one stage, I would be going to the city every day from Juhu, which was quite far from the city, to work on getting the permission to build the temple. And in fact, Srila Prabhupada was so concerned about that he didn't want to leave Bombay until we actually got the permit. And so he stayed in Bombay for about 3 months, every evening speaking about the teachings of Lord Kapila to Devotee, which was eventually compiled into a book. So usually I'd get back from the city just in time to take a little prasad and attend the kirtan in class. And Srila Prabhupada was so concerned about the work that sometimes he would call me to the Vyasa-san during the program and ask for the news. But still, he wanted us to be happy in Krishna consciousness. So one evening during the program, he announced from the Vyasa-san, "You must always dance in kirtan, even if you don't get the permission." And another example was, anyway, so, for some time we didn't have a proper place for Srila Prabhupada in Juhu. And so he would stay at different life members' homes in the city. So in 1973, when he was staying at Kartikeya Mahadevi's flat at Seaface Park, I would meet him in the evening and give him a report. And, I would always try to engage the people I met somehow or other. If someone didn't want to become a life member, I'd ask him to place an advertisement in a publication. If he didn't want to place an ad, I would ask him to buy a set of books. If he didn't want to buy a set of books, I would ask him to give a donation, or at least buy one book, or at least give something, anything, to help and do some service. And at the end of the day, I'd report to Srila Prabhupada. So one day I met many people and not one contributed in any way. So in the evening when I came back and gave the report to Srila Prabhupada, I felt very disappointed. But Srila Prabhupada instructed, if you sincerely try your best to please Krishna, Krishna will be satisfied, even if others are not. So I thought about that a lot, and he was really reminding me of what bhakti is to please Krishna. And if we sincerely try our best to please Krishna, Krishna will be satisfied, even if others are not. Meaning, even if the people I met were not satisfied and didn't want to contribute, and even if the other devotees weren't satisfied, because I didn't bring in any results. So, yeah, I would say that was a very important part of Srila Prabhupada's spiritual protection, that he always encouraged us, and, no matter what was happening. Even with the Juhu land, when there were so many complications and we weren't getting, the permission to build, Srila Prabhupada said, okay, we'll turn Hare Krishna land into a bus stop. We'll have buses, we'll fill them up with books and devotees and send them out, and when they need more books, they can come back. We'll make it a bus stop. So he was always, always encouraging. Always encouraging. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maharaj. It's really heartening to hear about Srila Prabhupada's mood of encouraging his devotees. Now, from 77, if we compare the situation today, the number of congregation devotees have grown exponentially, and
Yeah.
ISKCON has become largely a very congregation-based organization. So, in this context, the very future stability and growth and spiritual strength of ISKCON very much rests upon the health of the Grihasthashram. So, I would request you to share some of Srila Prabhupada's instructions or, demonstrations of care for Grihasthashram, or, how the husband and wife should stay together in a Krishna conscious setting, and how you saw Srila Prabhupada demonstrate care for the Grihasthas.
Yeah, he very much emphasized that the couple should stay together. There was a Bengali lady in Bombay who was having a very difficult time with her husband. She was a you could say, congregation devotee, And so she appealed to Srila Prabhupada to give her permission to leave her husband. I mean, she didn't even say divorce, but she just asked for his permission to separate. And Srila Prabhupada refused. He was very strong, that she must stay with her husband. And in general, he really insisted on the point that there's no divorce in Krishna consciousness. And, he was concerned that the householders were able to maintain themselves. Now, during Srila Prabhupada's time, pretty much all the devotees, you could say, were temple devotees, meaning they lived in the temple. And they were maintained by the temple. But Srila Prabhupada had a concern that they shouldn't, take advantage of the temple. He wanted them to be responsible. And he said that we could maintain householders if they were doing essential service. And he defined essential service as service that we would have to pay someone else to do if they weren't doing it. And under those circumstances, we could maintain them. But otherwise, he wanted them to be responsible. He didn't want them to take advantage of the temple facility. And this is it's an odd way of looking at care, in the sense that he wasn't, in a way, caring for them physically, but he was caring for them spiritually, in the sense that he didn't want them to, take undue advantage of Krishna's property and facilities. So, but as a rule, if on Hare Krishna land, if a couple wanted, Prabhupada didn't allow the couples to stay together. And he said it was that Hare Krishna land was really for like renounced householders, or maybe older householders. So anyway, he would regularly check on how the space on the property was being used. And I would have to go like one by one and tell him who was staying in each room. So in one room, I had put or allowed a householder couple to stay together. And Srila Prabhupada asked me why I had done that, because he didn't want that as a rule. And so I mentioned the devotee's name, and I said, I wanted to save him, because otherwise he was drifting away further and further. So he said, well, that way, if you're ready to give the householders a room, with a fan and food and everything else, the whole city of Bombay will come to be saved. And then what will you do? So, of course, he wanted to save every disciple, but he also wanted us to maintain certain principles that would govern how we accommodated devotees. And you're asking about householders and how we would engage them. And there was another case. Anyway, there were a few cases involving householders whom Srila Prabhupada wanted to be responsible and not depend on the temple. And one, interesting case was Ambarish Das, Alfred Ford. Ambarish Das came to Juhu. He was my preaching assistant for a while. I used to take him to meet big people. And before leaving Juhu, he had a meeting with Srila Prabhupada about his future. And I happened to be there. And Srila Prabhupada told him that he wanted him to work, because he wanted people to understand that one could be a devotee of Krishna and at the same time have a responsible position in society. So Ambarish Prabhu asked Srila Prabhupada, do I have to work with the Ford Motor Company? And Srila Prabhupada said, no, any work. And then Ambarish Prabhu asked, well, what about association? What will I do for association when I'm working? And Srila Prabhupada said, if you always think I'm doing this for Krishna, that will be your association. So, of course, the association of devotees is essential. And, as far as possible, their householders should have a morning and evening program. As Srila Prabhupada said, first best, of course, it's, in context, but he said, first best is to live in the temple. Second best is to live near the temple and come to the temple every day. And next best is to turn your home into a temple. So yeah, he definitely wanted the householders to have their spiritual programs in the temple or at home.
Thank you, Maharaj, for sharing your realizations. And just an added point is that many of the examples which you quoted of full-time devotees of those times. But then you also saw Srila Prabhupada interact with the existing householders in the Indian society at that time. So, what was Srila Prabhupada's recommendation to people, and how would he, guide them when when he saw that they're already having their own employment and business and kind of a potential congregation?
Yeah. He would encourage them to come to the temple, but mainly he would encourage them to do service. And for many of the householders, that service meant giving Lakshmi. And, with Srila Prabhupada, when he didn't ask for money that much, but he would talk about the principle, even the principle of householders giving 50%. And so he would, he would encourage the householders to do service by contributing financially. And according to their ability, he would ask them to serve the mission. One of Srila Prabhupada's maybe most prominent householder devotees in Bombay was Mr. P.L. Sethi, who was by work a building contractor. And Srila Prabhupada really engaged him, in the construction at Juhu, first in building an additional floor on the top of those 6 tenement buildings at the back of Hare Krishna land. And Srila Prabhupada told Mr. Sethi, and this is part of Prabhupada's care for his disciples, that they should have proper accommodations. And he said, it's one of the duties of the spiritual master to see that his disciples have proper accommodations. So he engaged Mr. Sethi in that building work. And when the first building was done, Mr. Sethi took Srila Prabhupada on a tour. Prabhupada wanted to see the facility. And Srila Prabhupada was so pleased that he had created this facility for Prabhupada's disciples that he said, just as you are building these rooms for my disciples here, Krishna will be preparing your room for you in Vaikuntha. And Mr. Sethi said, I'm a sinful man, which he wasn't, but he said, I'm a sinful man. How can I go to Vaikuntha? And Srila Prabhupada said, you don't worry about that. I'll manage that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maharaj. We see that children are the future of the society. So with respect to ISKCON, how did Srila Prabhupada envisage the role for children, and what was Srila Prabhupada's vision with respect to caring for children within the movement and within family?
That's a very good question. I will have to go and come back in 1 minute.
So we would like to take all of you across our website, www.iskoncourses.com. So basically, with respect to spiritual care, many devotees across the world have reached out to us asking for online portals where they could register and study Srila Prabhupada's books at their own pace. They want to study Bhagavad Gita, Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction, Sri Shopanishad, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and various other courses. And it is a fact that all across ISKCON, various institutions like the MIHE or the Mayapur Institute, the Bhakti courses at ISKCON Chowpatty, the Bhaktivedanta College at Radhadesh, the Bhaktivedanta Research Center here at Govardhan Eco Village, and the online courses at Govardhan Eco Village, to name a few. And recently, we also found out about the wonderful range of courses being offered by Bhaktivedanta Manor, ISKCON London, and many such courses online have been offered, but we did not have a single portal where all of these courses would be accessed. So we are happy to share with you that on this portal, iskoncourses.com, you could have a look at the entire range of different courses being offered. We have also graded the courses as per the different levels of entry point for beginners, for intermediate, then advanced, and according to the level of Krishna consciousness courses you wish to take, you could connect with any of these courses and upgrade and increase and enhance your understanding of Krishna consciousness. So we have also divided these courses into sadhana or spiritual practices, skills, and various dimensions which people would experience in the course of their life. So we have divided them into what is known as the learning pathways, and we will add many more such categories depending on the kind of courses which come forward and come to our notice. So in this iskoncourses.com, at the top end corner, you will see the contact us button. So in case you have any interesting course, which is a certified course, and it is being connected to an ISKCON temple, then we would like you to connect with us and send us a message to contact us. Thank you very much. Now we have His Holiness Giriraj Maharaj back with us, and we would love to hear from him about Srila Prabhupada's caring for children.
Yes. Well, most of the devotees who joined ISKCON during Srila Prabhupada's time were quite young, and not many were even married, and then the ones who did get married didn't have children for a while. And then there were many children in the West. And but one child that we had in India was Saraswati, the daughter of Shamsundar and Malati. And, Srila Prabhupada was very affectionate towards her. There was one incident, not in Bombay, but the devotees, it might have been in Vrindavan, but anyway, the devotees were making a large quantity of chutney. It's like a big feast for many guests. And somehow Saraswati fell into the pot of chutney. And all the devotees were so worried about the chutney. And Prabhupada was worried about Saraswati. So, yeah, he was always very personal and caring. And in Los Angeles, after deity greeting, he would have a plate of cookies brought for the children, and you can see many videos of him giving cookies to the children. In Juhu, we didn't have devotee children as such, but we had tenants on the property and they had children. And Srila Prabhupada, so yeah, some of the devotees, Madhavisa Prabhu, and then he was assisted by Gargamuni Prabhu. They would have classes, sort of informal classes for the children of the tenants. And Srila Prabhupada was very pleased with that program. And, eventually Madhavisa Prabhu went to Australia. Gargamuni Prabhu went to travel in India. But Srila Prabhupada said this is a very important program and it should go on. Even if Madhavisa and Gargamuni are not there. And so the establishment of Gurukul, that was sort of like the beginning of Gurukul in India in an informal way. And, the establishment of Gurukuls was a very important part of Srila Prabhupada's program. And it was a way that he was, expressing his care for the children. And he didn't want the parents to neglect their children in the name of service or for the sake of service. There was one lady disciple who was engaged in deity worship, and Srila Prabhupada told her that, your child is your deity. You have to take care of your child. So, yeah, he was very concerned. Of course, it's good that devotees are enthusiastic to do service. And I believe in New Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada suggested an arrangement by which, one mother could look after the children while the other mothers were engaged in service. So that was good that the mothers were engaged in service, but he didn't want the children neglected in any way. And he took great care to make sure that the children were cared for.
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for sharing your experiences on Prabhupada and child care. I want to now, take the topic towards the history of the period when all of you were joining. So it was quite common for youth, especially in the West, to drop out from colleges and join various movements and things like that. Uh, but now, as we see society, families are very concerned about education and employment and career and things like that. So, in that period, when you saw Srila Prabhupada interacting with various devotees and with various families and youth, so what is your understanding of Srila Prabhupada's perspective on education, career, employment? Considering what the world is today and what the expectations of society and families are. So, could you throw some light on that aspect?
Well, in my own case, I was in my senior year in the university when I met Srila Prabhupada towards the end of my senior year, and joined the temple. And I asked the devotees, should I continue my studies or not? And the devotees said, you should continue and get your degree. It could be useful in the future. I never married and never had a career, but I think it was good. It didn't take much extra effort to get a degree. But there was a very interesting letter from Srila Prabhupada. It began like this. My father wrote Srila Prabhupada saying that I was a good student and that Prabhupada should encourage me to continue my studies. So Srila Prabhupada wrote me a letter in Boston, enclosing my father's letter, and saying, because my father mentioned psychology and some other things, and Srila Prabhupada wrote back, of course, we're more on the lines of divinity. So if you can, go into divinity and show that Krishna consciousness is the postgraduate study of all theistic conceptions, it will be a great service. So I didn't know whether Srila Prabhupada was instructing me to do that or giving me the choice. And I consulted my temple president, Satsvarupa Das Adhikari then, and he also didn't know. So he said I should clarify with Srila Prabhupada. So I wrote Srila Prabhupada, and I said, if you want me to go back to the university, I will, but if you're giving me the choice, I would rather stay in the temple and worship the deities and go on Sankirtan with the other devotees. And Srila Prabhupada wrote back, yes, there's no need for any further education. When Lord Chaitanya was discussing with Ramananda Rai, who is the best educated person, the answer was, one who is Krishna conscious is the best educated person. And similarly, when Prahlad's father asked him what the best thing he learned was, Prahlad replied that devotional service was the best thing. So yes, there's no need of any further education. Now that letter, when I went to India, the earlier letter when he said about divinity and establishing Krishna consciousness as the postgraduate study of all theological conceptions, I left that letter in Boston when I went to India. And Satsvarupa Maharaj shared that letter with Ravindra Swarup Prabhu. And Ravindra Swarup Prabhu took it as an instruction to him or direction for him. And he did, go back to the university, got his PhD. He's a brilliant person. So it's really, I think, quite an individual matter. Of course, the context now is quite different from when Srila Prabhupada was present. And I hesitate to presume what Srila Prabhupada would say in the present context, but I would say it's certainly, if one wants to, it's certainly a valid course of action to pursue one's studies and then, pursue a career, as long as one is able to maintain Krishna consciousness. So yeah, of course that's fine. But we shouldn't get so carried away with our studies and our careers that we neglect our Krishna consciousness.
Thank you very much, Mama. The next question is connected to financial care, because for anyone to live in this world, especially in the Grahasthashram. And ultimately the Grahasthashram is the one which also supports the other ashrams.
Yeah.
So, what was Srila Prabhupada's perspective on financial care? And I would also request you to share the story from Kolkata, where you went to the Birla's house in a very unique manner, and then got the first donation for the Mayapur construction, for the school or something.
Yeah.
So you could share that also.
Um, well, you know, Srila Prabhupada said the money is the honey. And, there was a famous so-called religious figure in India. And it was said that if people offered him money, his hand would curl and go, withdraw from it. But Srila Prabhupada said, no, if someone offers us money, we'll take it and use it for Krishna. So, he encouraged devotees to earn and contribute. I was a brahmachari, and so I didn't have much personal facility. But as you mentioned, I did want to approach the Birlas for a donation. And the head Birla in Calcutta was B.M. Birla. He was in charge of manufacturing the ambassador cars. And, I knew I couldn't just show up at his door with in a rickshaw or something and get anywhere. So I went to one of our life members and I said, I want to approach B.M. Birla, but, I want to arrive there looking like in a dignified manner. So can I borrow your car and driver? So, he gave me his car and driver, and I went to the Birla mansion. And, I looked pretty together with my car and chauffeur. And, they had those like circular driveways that would take you right up to the entrance, and the entrance was open. So I just walked in, with my briefcase, and I really didn't know where to turn. But anyway, I had to turn somewhere, so I turned to the left, and Mr. Birla's grandson was there. He was a very sweet young man, and very polite. He said, can I help you? And I said, I've come to meet Mr. Brij Mohan Birla. And so, Mr. Birla, he gave a big donation. I think it was the biggest to up till that time. But his grandson was very nice. There was a little delay in the donation coming. I wasn't sure what was happening. So I phoned the Birla residence and I spoke to the grandson. I asked him, do you have any idea what's happening with the donation your grandfather promised? So had a lot of good times and adventures in Srila Prabhupada service. Although personally we were poor, but we were in touch with a lot of very wealthy and aristocratic people in Calcutta to begin with. That's where I was first. And there was one, I don't even know why I'm saying this, it's just a little anecdote, but so before partition, the wealthiest man in what became Pakistan, West Pakistan, was Britan Malta, who was R.D. Birla's son-in-law. R.D. Birla gave his daughter, Radha Ben, in marriage to Bridgerton Malta. So after Srila Prabhupada left, my parents came. This is something I hope I can fit in, how Srila Prabhupada dealt with my parents, because it shows a lot. So anyway, so we had a program at Mr. Mota's house, and as is the custom or tradition or practice, as the guests were leaving after the program, Mrs. Mota, or maybe Mr. and Mrs. Mota, they were at the doors at the door, sort of, greeting the guests as they were leaving, and Mrs. Mota told my parents that if I tell my husband to do something, he may or may not do it. But if your son tells him to do something, he'll always do it. So that was like, could I say it's just Prabhupada's mercy that he, sort of engaged us and empowered us or inspired us. Yeah. Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada's dealings with your parents? Can please go ahead?
Yeah. Well, yeah, this was very instructive. So my parents came to Calcutta to visit me, and I was a little apprehensive because I just didn't know how I would deal with the situation. So the first thing Srila Prabhupada told me was that I should spend time with them, which I didn't even know if I should, beyond the bare minimum. He said, you should spend time with them. And then another thing he said was, you should not ask them for anything. Otherwise, they will think that we don't take care of our devotees. And factually, I was being taken care of. I didn't need to ask them for anything. But I found that very instructive. Yeah, I shouldn't ask anything of them, or else they'll think we're not taking care of our devotees. So they came, and I brought them to meet Srila Prabhupada, and he dealt with them so expertly, especially. Anyway, he spoke in such a way as to sort of break my father's prejudices against India or Indians, and even in favor of like big people in the material world. And but then towards the end of the meeting, I was quite thin then. I think a lot of our devotees were quite thin back then. But anyway, I was quite thin. And my mother was very concerned about my health. And in those days, people in the West at least had the idea that if you don't eat meat, you won't be able to get enough protein. So my mother brought this up. And, Srila Prabhupada, he would always have sweets on his table to give to people, some prasad. And, being Calcutta especially, he had sandesh. And so when my mother expressed her concern that I wasn't getting enough protein, so he distributed these some sandesh to my parents as prasad. And he said, these are made of cheese. and they're very high in protein. And then he turned to me and said, you must eat 24 rasgulla and sandesh every day, which I'm still working on. I haven't made it, but I'm working at it. And anyway, there are many details, but the result was that my parents were charmed by Srila Prabhupada. And as they were leaving his room, and I was accompanying them, my father said to me, I can say two things about your master. He really knows how to deal with people, and he's a brilliant organizer. And in my father's value system, those were like the two highest compliments he could pay to anyone. Anyway, after Calcutta, eventually I went to Madras. The first ISKCON devotee to go to Madras. And there I was living at different people's homes. We had no temple or center. And I was eating lots of good idlis and dosas and sambar, and I put on weight. Then eventually I arranged a program for Srila Prabhupada. He came for a week, and he saw that I had gained weight. And he said that you should take a picture of yourself and send it to your mother. He hadn't forgotten her concern about my health, my weight, my nourishment, and he wanted to he wanted me to reassure her, by sending me a picture of myself, a little more healthy looking.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maharaj, for sharing these amazing experiences with Srila Prabhupada. Just on the perspective of care for the renounced order or those who have been senior preachers within ISKCON, many of the ISKCON devotees are not aware of the efforts which yourself and Tamal Krishna Maharaj made to create a facility in Govardhan, especially for those who have been experienced preachers and sannyasis and senior brahmacharis, and how they could be cared for by taking retreats and taking time off, downtime, recuperating, re-energizing themselves again for preaching. So could you share with our devotees who are hearing today's event about how that particular incident came to pass, and what was the history of you acquiring that place, and what was the thought process?
Yes. We became aware of the importance of Govardhan. It's in the Shastras, and especially at the end, Srila Prabhupada wanted to go to Govardhan on parikrama for Govardhan puja. Of course, his health did not allow him to do that, but it was in our minds that he wanted to do that. So this palace, it was a king's palace, was not being used, and I found out about the owner. He was the Maharaja of Chhatarpur, which is in Madhya Pradesh, and he had like two bases, one at Chhatarpur and one at Khajuraho, which is sort of a tourist destination. So I went and met him, and yes, I'd heard he was favorable to ISKCON, so I went and met him, took a train down, um, I asked him to donate the palace. And he said, if you had asked me earlier, I would have been happy to donate it. But times are bad for kings nowadays. So I can't donate it. But I'll give it to you for a very reasonable price, which he did. I mean, it was really, really reasonable. And his panda at Govardhan was very upset that he was giving it to us for so little, and a lot of his family members were upset. But he stuck to his word, and so we acquired that palace at Govardhan. And yeah, we wanted it to be a place for men to come and go deep in sadhana. And so we had a rule that, of course, women could come, but they could not spend the night there. And it was good not only for our devotees, but that policy was very much appreciated in the Govardhan area. People came to know of it, and they were pleased and impressed, because I guess maybe they might have had some questions about how strict we were or what our principles were. And so many. And although it's true that Tamal Krishna Goswami and I were the ones to acquire it, but Keshava Bharati Das Goswami, he also, Tamal Krishna Goswami engaged him there, and he oversaw the refurbishment. We paid for most of it, but he oversaw the refurbishment of the palace. And devotees come. I mentioned Ravindra Sarup Prabhu earlier in a different context, but one year he was, elected to be the GBC chairman. So he came and he spent a month at Govardhan chanting 64 rounds a day to prepare himself for the responsibility of being the GBC chairman. And many devotees come. Vaisheshika Prabhu comes, and he and Keshava Bharati Das Goswami, they have readings, during Kartik. So it has served a purpose, especially, for the brahmacharis and sannyasis to come and go deep in bhajan at the side of the holy Govardhan Hill.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you for covering so many different aspects in today's discussion. In conclusion, I would like to request you to share some of your memories with His Holiness Bhakticharu Swami Maharaj. The whole world of ISKCON is really in separation from His Holiness Bhakticharu Swami Maharaj.
Yeah.
And various memorials are happening all over the world. So, as part of our conversation on devotee care, he was such an emblem and symbol of devotee care. I would request you to share some of your memories or his interactions with Srila Prabhupada and some of your interactions during those times, and also after Srila Prabhupada departed, and some of your, heart's memories to share.
Yes. Well, of course, His Holiness Bhakticharu Swami Maharaj took very good care of Srila Prabhupada during his last months and weeks when he was ill in Vrindavan. And I feel eternally indebted to him for the way he took care of Srila Prabhupada. And there were many past times of Srila Prabhupada's towards the end in which Bhakti Charu Swami was involved. One was Prabhupada's desire to go to Govardhan Hill by bullock cart, because Lokanath Swami had come to Vrindavan, and he had been traveling around India with a bullock cart and going to holy places and holding programs, festivals, distributing books. And Srila Prabhupada was very encouraged by that program, and he also wanted to further encourage Lokanath Swami. So, he said he would take a bullock cart, go by bullock cart to Govardhan Hill on the occasion of Govardhan Puja. Now, Bhakti Charu Swami and the other devotees who were personally serving Srila Prabhupada then, including Tamal Krishna Goswami, understood that Srila Prabhupada's health would not sustain that journey. Even if they were saying they could put a mattress on the bullock cart. But even then, the roads were so bumpy with potholes, and Prabhupada wouldn't have been able to sustain that journey. And Srila Prabhupada had a dream about a Ramanuja Kaviraj taking care of him. And so, Adridhara Prabhu in Calcutta found a Ramanuja Kaviraj who came to Vrindavan, and he was really good, and he was really helping Srila Prabhupada. And he said, Prabhupada is making progress, but he will not be able to sustain that journey by bullock cart to Govardhan Hill. So in the end, there are many details, but in the end, Bhakti Charu Swami was instrumental in getting Srila Prabhupada's godbrother, Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji, to appeal to Srila Prabhupada not to go. And Srila Prabhupada immediately agreed. But much later, whatever, but in Mayapur, Bhakti Charu Swami had very big quarters upstairs at the very top. And he was, such a, wonderful Vaishnav and a gracious host. And he had space to accommodate many devotees. So, especially during the time of the Gaur Purnima festival, GBC meetings and Gaur Purnima festival. So many devotees would stay upstairs in his area. I remember one year he gave a room towards the end to His Holiness Gaur Govinda Swami Maharaj, which was very nice. And Gaur Govinda Maharaj, he would have darshans there and speak to devotees. There's a lot of space. One year Radhanath Swami and I stayed there, or more than 1 year. And he was a great cook and a great host, and he could organize good cooking. And I remember he would arrange these feasts, that he would serve us there. He would also arrange feasts for the GBC members that would be carried over to the Lotus building, where they would take prasad regularly. And but he was like such a loving and caring person. I mean, and he would help with projects. I mean, there's so many projects he helped. I mean, but I'm thinking of one because one devotee, in the mood of appreciating Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj and feeling separation from him, from South Africa. So her grandparents were, wonderful devotees, and they lived in a town called Peter Maritzburg, which is not far from Durban. And they wanted to build a temple. I mean, not her grandparents as such, but the community wanted to build a temple. And they just couldn't do it. They couldn't muster the resources. So somehow one of the devotees mentioned it to Bhakti True Swami, and he immediately, swung into action. Like as she wrote in her letter to me, he was a man of action, and he arranged, all the resources to build that temple, and that, quite quickly, and that temple is standing there. The deities are bestowing their mercy and blessings. So, yeah, and he would go to places and arrange for gold plating or gold leafing. I don't know all the places, but I know in Los Angeles, in New Dwarka, he did that. He arranged for some gold leafing for the Singhasans, for the deities. And at Gitanagari, he arranged for gold leafing for Srila Prabhupada's Vyasasan. And he was so generous. And Krishna, gave him a lot of facility, and he used that facility to serve Srila Prabhupada and the devotees. And he's so personal with everyone, so approachable. And he's being missed sorely, and he will be missed. And but he is really a very, very loving and caring person.